I walk on untrodden ground. There is scarcely any part of my conduct which may not hereafter be drawn into precedent. George Washington. Welcome to RAC Adventures Presidential Park series, where we will look into the different presidents of the United States throughout the country's history and discover what national park units are dedicated to them, as well as if they had any major impact on the creation or expansion of the national park system itself. Yellowstone, America's first national park, was established in 1872 under President Ulysses S. Grant, but America had already existed for almost a century by the time Yellowstone came around, and so we must turn back the clock all the way back to the first president of a young, spirited nation that had just recently won a revolution, George Washington. Born in 1732 near Pope's Creek in Virginia, Washington did a lot of moving around in his early years, moving in 1734 to a place that would eventually become known as Mount Vernon, before moving again in 1738 to Ferry Farm, where Washington would live for most of the rest of his childhood. While Mount Vernon, which would become an iconic symbol of Washington's life, is not under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service, George Washington Birthplace National Monument, located near the original Pope's Creek residence, commemorates the president's place of birth and was established in 1930. While Washington never truly received a formal education, tutors helped George become proficient in many of the basic studies, including reading and writing, but especially the maths, as George would soon gain his first job as a surveyor during his teenage years, eventually becoming a professional at the job following an expedition in the late 1740s, which prompted him to be given the task of surveying one of the recently formed counties in western Virginia. It would be only a few short years later, however, that Washington would find himself in the military for the first time. Joining in February 1753 at age 21, it would be a little over a year later when Washington would see combat for the first time, sent to Fort Necessity, Pennsylvania to warn the French to leave a valuable area of land, the Ohio River Valley, alone. On July 3, 1754, the Battle of Fort Necessity, memorialized today as Fort Necessity National Battlefield under the NPS, started a 7-year-long conflict that ended at last in a British victory in 1763. Washington, however, would only serve until 1758, when, having completed his duty to secure the tributaries that formed the Ohio River, he returned to one of his childhood homes, Mount Vernon, and married Martha Custis in 1759, who would go on to become the first First Lady. George would remain at Mount Vernon for around 15 years until 1775, when the American Revolution broke out. Sent by the government to command the Continental Army, which was at the time being attacked in the Boston area, Washington heeded the call and proceeded to valiantly rally his troops over the next 8 years. Revolutionary War sites related to Washington include Washington's headquarters National Historic Site, used as his command post during the Siege of Boston in the early years of the war, Valley Forge National Historical Park in Pennsylvania, where Washington's men camped during the brutal winter of 1777-78, and Colonial National Historical Park, part of which is dedicated to British General Cornwallis' surrender to Washington following the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. Following Yorktown, Washington resigned from the military in 1783, his goal to live out the rest of his days back at Mount Vernon. Unfortunately for him, he soon found himself brought out of retirement, this time for political reasons instead of military ones. Recognizing that the new Articles of Confederation created by Congress were not sustainable, he joined and led the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, where delegates from every state in the Union came up with a stronger, more energetic constitution, thus truly cementing the United States' status as a country in the world. The place of this monumentous feat can still be seen today in Philadelphia, at Independence National Historical Park, home to Independence Hall where the Constitution was signed, as well as the famed Liberty Bell. After helping to ratify the Constitution among the states, Washington once again hoped to retire back to Mount Vernon, but again he was met with pleas to become the first executive leader, the president. Washington got a unanimous consensus to lead in the very first presidential election, and he spent the next 8 years leading the country. Washington did not actually live in the White House during his presidency, as the residence had not been fully constructed yet. Instead, Washington stayed in the president's house in Philadelphia for most of his presidency. Following the end of his second term, Washington chose to step down from the role of president, setting a 2-term precedent that would last until Franklin Delano Roosevelt around 150 years later. Although he only lived for 2 more years after his presidency, Washington finally got the retirement he always wanted, spending his final years with Martha at Mount Vernon, where he died in December of 1799. George Washington is remembered for many things: his humble beginnings, his confident leadership, his compassionate but fair attitude towards others. Many National Park Service sites commemorate the life and times of Washington, so here are a few of the most important. The Washington Monument. Standing at 555 feet tall, the Washington Monument was constructed over the course of 40 years, finally being completed in 1884 and being dedicated in 1885. It came into the possession of the NPS in 1933. The George Washington Parkway. First opened in 1932 and completed in 1968, this park unit is actually a road connecting a series of park units in the Washington, D.C. area, named after Washington as well. The original intent was to connect the nation's capital all the way down to Mount Vernon, but funds only allowed for a 40-mile stretch in the DC area. Washington State. This is not an NBS unit, but let's be honest, it's too big not to mention it. Washington became a state in 1889. Mount Rushmore. Created by famed sculptor Gutzon Borglum, the 4 presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lincoln, were completed in 1941. The original plan called for the presidents to have full body carvings, but Borglum passed before he could see the full extent of his vision. And with that, we conclude our first video in RAC's Presidential Park series. Let us know in the comments if we missed a site, and until next time, this has been RAC Adventures covering George Washington and the national parks.